You're listening to Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment. This podcast is a place where science meets soul and healing meets hope, where the latest in science meets ancient wisdom to illuminate the path toward healing and transformation. We break through stigma and misinformation to explore the transformative power of psychedelic therapy, holistic health, and the mind-body connection. Through stories, insight, and expert conversations, we provide practical solutions to help you reclaim your mental health, embrace your spirituality, and achieve true enlightenment. Hosted by Alan Wiederhold, author of the book Walking in the Garden, Discovering God Through Psychedelics. Alan is the consummate explorer, passionate about empowering others to embrace the divinity of their true selves, as well as the founder of Neuma Health, whose mission is to restore and transform lives. Here's your host, Alan Wiederhold.
Have you ever had a phone call that changed your life? Have you ever had a phone call or a message from someone never thought it would happen? Well, that happened to me yesterday. My name is Alan Wiederhold. I am the CEO and founder of Neuma Health. I talk pretty openly about my childhood trauma. I talk very openly about the fact that unfortunately, 30% of males are sexually abused and never talk about it. That was the case for me. If you are new to the show, let me bring you up to speed as I always do. I am a trauma survivor and psychedelic assisted facilitator. I am the CEO of a startup called Neuma, where we are focusing our mission on clinical hydration for psychedelic assisted therapy, as well as building a community between facilitators, psychedelic enthusiasts, or searchers like myself. And I got that phone call yesterday. I got the phone call that my abuser died over the weekend from a liver condition that, ironically enough, my family has this gene variant. And unfortunately, none of the men on my grandfather's side live beyond the age of 70. Almost a double whammy. I got up yesterday morning and it just felt off. Now, I have a crazy routine. So I like to go to bed between 9:30 and 10. I have an Aura ring and I look at my data, track it. I work out. I meditate, I cold plunge, I live a pretty healthy life. I read, I journal, I process my emotions, but for whatever reason, yesterday just felt. I go through my morning, I leave to go to the office, then I get the call. I get the call from my mom that my abuser had passed away. She thought that she owed it to me to tell me first before she called my dad or anyone else. Telling my parents a few years ago that this had happened when I was young was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Telling my wife as we were struggling to put together the pieces of our marriage was even harder. I had lost myself along the way, to the point where I would lay in bed, as I had said in earlier episodes, thinking about ways to just be done and let the world be done with me. I never did it. I never really could go through with it because for whatever reason, I didn't have the courage, or maybe it was just a test. So a few years ago, in an effort to restore my marriage, we were doing a couples journal, and the question was, what's the biggest secret you've never told? And I blurted it out before I could even think. And my wife looked at me. She said, I've never heard this story. Now, we've been together for 23 years at this point, and I had never told it. When I did, it was like this weight had lifted off of my shoulders. Like I could finally breathe. But then the questions start coming. And then when I told my parents, there were all of these other questions and feelings. Guilt. How did this happen? When did this happen? How could this happen in my grandparents' home every Sunday while they were all there? I come from a very large Mexican family, and it was an incredible memory growing up for most of it. When I had my first psychedelic experience, and I shared the story in my last episode about how I actually record my transcript when I go into a psychedelic experience, and listening to the first 8 minutes of my transcripts yesterday after a year and a half, there were so many emotions that came back, so many things that I needed to process, so much journaling. Well, my mom told me, and she hung up the phone, I was in a daze. Didn't even know how to respond. I started to walk through my process as a facilitator and asking the same questions of the people that I would help. But it was different. This was me. So as I started to walk down this journal path, I started trying to separate what the feelings were from the reactions. I shared with a few people what was going on. Called Rachel. I hung up the phone with my mom, and I said, he's gone. She said, who? And I said, my abuser. How do you feel? That's a very loaded question. I tried to figure out how I felt. I was numb. I was angry. I was upset. I felt like this small child again in a room. And then as I started to journal and I started to write this out, I started to realize again what was emotions and what were reactions. And then the strangest thing happened. I realized that I was given a gift. You see, I had a conversation with a friend a few months ago. We talk about these shadow partners, the villains that come into our lives, and they give us these lessons that maybe we didn't want, or maybe we were trying to figure out what the lesson was. And in my first psychedelic experience, I'm 8 minutes into the conversation, and it says, is this what freedom feels like? Is this what freedom feels like? I'd never been free. For the longest time, I can't even remember a time that I wasn't afraid, that I wasn't so worried about what people thought. I was a slave to my own feelings. When everyone else had confidence, although I was an extrovert, I was dying inside. So as I'm in this first experience, and I say, this is what freedom looks like, I could hear it in my voice. I could hear the pain, but I could hear the freedom. And as I listened yesterday to 4.5 hours of my transcripts of my first psychedelic experience, where the healing took place, I found all of these incredible gifts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment. We hope you're enjoying the deep dive into psychedelics, neuroplasticity, and the path to transformation. Before we continue, let's discuss recovery. After powerful experiences, your mind deserves more than just rest. It needs real support. That's where Neuma Hydrate comes in. Formulated with GABA, taurine, inositol, magnesium, and more, Neuma Hydrate is designed to help your brain recover faster and support neuroplasticity, giving you the clarity and the energy to fully embrace your journey. Fuel your recovery and elevate your mind with Neuma Hydrate. Check out neuma.health to learn more. Now, enjoy the rest of the episode. After that experience, I was driving down the road a couple of weeks later, and I hear this voice, God, telling me, you know what you need to do. And I said, no, don't think I do. And the voice said, you need to find your abuser and you need to forgive him. And I said, there is no way I am going to do that. There is no way. And the voice said to me again, you've already done it in your experience. Just finish the task. So after 48 years, I found him on Facebook. I knew about where he had lived. And I contacted him. And I asked if I could speak to him. Traded messages. And before I know it, in a conversation with him for the first time in 48 years. Now, going back through the transcript and listening again, there were so many things that came out of it. I had actually seen the room, heard it, I could feel it, smell, I could see the bed and the pillows and where all of this happened for 2 years. I told myself I did not want to go into the room 3 times, but as my friend Matt always says, with a bad experience, just accept whatever comes. And if it's a dragon, then approach it with natural curiosity and climb into the dragon's nose and look out. I never once ran from any of the negative experiences, from any of my experiences. And by the end of the 3rd time in the room, he was on the bed crying. He was telling me how sorry he was and that it was done to him. When I had the conversation with him on the phone, he told me again, this is what had happened. And I told him I already knew. And I said, I'm not here to give you absolution. I don't know where you are in your life. Don't care. I don't know if you're married or have kids. This is not anything that I am going to do to destroy your life. I am only here to tell you that I am going to be. That you are no longer going to rule, run my life or my heart. I got off the phone April of 23, and I thought to myself, I can do anything. So as I hear this news yesterday that he had passed away, and all these feelings and these reactions were coming over me, I started to question, was I angry? Because I'd never really had a chance to be angry? Should I be angry? And I screamed in my car as loud as I could. And then again, I realized I got to call him. I got to confront him. I got to forgive him. But then I started to ask myself, what was it about the conversation that was the most important thing for me? Then I started to put myself into his position, in his place. As I saw with him on my experience, crying on the bed, feeling the way that he did, not knowing the trauma that had been inflicted into his life, I made it about me. Yesterday, as I'm going through my journal and I'm getting all of this anger and this emotional unwinding, I realized that I didn't have to own any of it anymore. I had forgiven him. God had allowed me the opportunity to confront and to forgive. And that for whatever reason, maybe he spent the last year and a half in absolution. Maybe he'd done it to others. Maybe he hadn't. Don't know. But I no longer allowed him to control those feelings. I no longer allowed those to dominate me. And what started off as a really dark place yesterday turned into gratitude. It turned into the opportunity to be able to see that a shadow villain played a part in my story. And that while there were really bad things that came out of that, there are a lot of really good things that came out as well. And because of that story, I have chosen to make this my new story. I have allowed my book to be able to be heard on a stage where I've had people come up to me and say, thank you for sharing, because that gives me permission to feel. I've had pastors of churches who have Googled and saw Christianity and psychedelics and fly to meet me. Not because I am some great speaker, but because I'm someone who cares. I'm someone who has been in those experiences. And I have chose to rise and come out the other side. One interesting thing about trauma is that it is so easy for us to focus so much on the trauma that we don't allow others to see it, feel it, hear it. For years, I walked that road alone, never telling anyone. And then having to explain to your family, and then have them have their feelings and stories of what had happened. Then the gift of being able to create a company that focuses on mental health, to be able to create a product that allows healing in the brain, and to be able to share the story for others to be able to listen to. It doesn't matter what the journey. We're all trying to ride and walk the same road. There are lots of avenues to get there. So as I sit here tonight, the day after I was told this news, I'm not angry. So many people probably would say you're nuts. How on earth could you forgive someone doing that? But I, again, never put myself in his shoes. I never allowed myself to see the possibility that it was done to him and that he was repeating. Now, again, I'm not saying or advocating that we excuse these things away. But for me, part of my healing had to occur by confronting him and allowing that to take place. As I listened to my transcripts, there were so many things that came out of that. Freedom, my family, showing up to be the husband and the father and the grandfather that they needed, but more importantly, for me to show up to be the version that I needed for myself. Because when I was able to find that, when I was able to find my heart laying on the side of a dirt road, that's when I was able to let go and to create, connect. So as I sit here again, thinking about all of this tonight, this rambling of feelings and emotions and reactions, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to confront, to have a conversation, and to do it for him. Because forgiveness very rarely is for the other person. It's normally for ourselves. And with his passing and the whole day of trying to figure out where I actually was and how I actually felt about this, doing just fine. And it's given me the fuel and the desire and passion to not only keep going, put myself deeper into the ring. This is Alan Wiederhold. I am the CEO and founder of Neuma Health. This is Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment.